Welcome to B2B No Bull.
That's right, no double speaker gibberish, no talking heads. This is a safe place to talk about what you as professionals in the space can do to look like heroes to your bosses, make sales very happy, bring success to the organization, and that bottom line. Let's get started.
Hi, everybody. I'm Liz Brohan. I am Mark's slightly younger, but definitely calmer sister.
Define calm.
Next episode.
Normally, we bring you one brilliant guest, but today we're bringing you five, and not literally, because our producer would probably quit if we tried.
That's
Although
right.
it does sound kind of intriguing, I must admit.
Yeah, there you go. I'm intrigued as well. So Mark and I have been doing B2B No Bull now for about a year. We have interviewed CMOs, we've interviewed innovators, we've interviewed researchers and top-notch business strategists. So we really wanted to take this episode and just kind of recap the year. We've learned a bunch, talked to amazing people, and just wanted to make sure that, you're coming along for the ride and kind of getting as much out of it as Mark and I are. So, we're going to talk about what surprised us most and what didn't. So let's just kind of start there. I think I'll start by talking about what has surprised me. And then, Mark, of course, I'd love to hear from you as well. But, what's really kind of cool is that our guests over the past year have unknowingly kind of finished each other's sentences, right? They've talked about how AI changes everything. Well, that's all we talk about today, right? And then others have talked about the customer experience matters much more than the products. That's not new, but the way we heard it was very much new. So I wanted to dive into that today too. We also heard the competitive is a leadership advantage. Over the year, all of the interviews that we've conducted, everybody kind of comes at the same sorts of topics, but they come at it from very different angles. Don't you think?
I think so. And you know what? To be rather direct, no bullshit. I mean, I'm always going to plug my sister because my sister is probably the most enlightened B2B marketer I know. And she was a groundbreaking CEO and broke through a lot of ceilings over the course of her 30-year career in B2B marketing. And when she had the idea to launch this podcast, we did it for a reason. I think I cited that. No bullshit.
Yeah.
Because, there's a ton of podcasts out there, but I think what makes this different is because we're trying to tell just good, solid information by talking to industry leaders and pace setters, because today we're looking back at the conversations that changed the way we think about marketing.
Absolutely.
Not because they were popular, not because they were right. Some of these predictions seemed radical when our guests said them. Today, they're simply reality. I'll cover all the topics that you just pointed out here. That's why we're doing this and continue to do this.
Absolutely.
Your vision, my friend, your vision.
Okay, well, that's awesome to hear. And now we get to talk about the vision of at least 5 of the wonderful people that we interviewed over the past year, right? So I think let's just start with somebody that I think you and I have always thought, this guy can see around corners, Scott Wingo. Now, tell us a little bit about Scott Wingo, Mark.
Well, my background has been to the very beginning of e-commerce. Back in the salad days of 1998, we launched Internet Retailer Magazine. And, we caught the wave of B2C online retailing and then B2B at the very inception. So we kind of got to know a lot of the people that kind of shaped the industry. And Scott Wingo's one of them. Scott Wingo was first in the marketplace services business, scaled that to be the first e-commerce company ever to go public on the big board. And then Scott was very early on to all things AI. And of course, AI is the game changer we all talk ad nauseum about today. But Scott Wingo's different. Scott Wingo knows how the agent world and how the channel shift in AI impacts not just everybody at the organizational level, but B2B marketing in particular. So we asked Scott to give us an in-depth tutorial and take us to school on what is the importance of AI as it really plays out across the world of B2B marketing. And that he did, and did some. And I think one of the biggest takeaways I still have from that, Liz, is that the change of pace is being led by marketing. And organizations that don't have a leader, have a structure, have a game plan to make sure that marketing integrates across all those channels, from retention to personalization to campaigns to every aspect of that, they're behind the times. And you know what? They're going to lose market share.
Yeah.
That was Scott's takeaway, and I still think that's highly relevant today.
And I'll tell you where he started. When all of us were still asking ourselves, how do we write the best prompt? Scott came out and told us, you're asking the wrong question. So listen to what he said about that for just a second.
I think your priority needs to move from using this as a internal, tooling for automating emails and that kind of thing. And I think what you need to start thinking about is outside in. So how do you optimize your transaction engine for your products to be seen, researched, and bought using the agentic commerce engines? So just to level set, the big one is ChatGPT, and it's like 80% share. But then you also have Perplexity. Microsoft's is called Copilot. You can go to copilot.microsoft.com. And then Google's is called Gemini. Google's is confusing because they have 3 flavors of AI. So when you get the little box on traditional Google that answers your question, that's called an AI overview. And then you can go to gemini.google.com, which is their just pure chatbot. And then they have the third one, and that's the one that's kind of the most active right now, is on traditional Google. If you look to the right, it says AI mode. And that's kind of a preview of what's going to come when they flip from traditional Google mode to AI mode. And what I encourage marketers to do is just that. So learn these engines that I just mentioned and go look for some of your products on them.
What he just said just completely changed my perspective on AI and how we're really supposed to be using it. He wasn't talking about using it to write emails. He was talking about AI actually becoming a customer, and a customer who actually went out and bought our products and our services. That to me was radical and visionary at the time. And honest to gosh, this was only like 10 months ago.
I know.
And now we're here.
But the thing is, AI in months is kind of like dog years. So the fact that we talked to Scott that long ago, there has been game-changing technologies and things take place. But the thing to keep in mind here is that basically Scott gave us an upfront, in-depth, behind-the-scenes look at what's going to happen, how with AI was changing from being kind of task-oriented, writing email campaigns, creating content, those kind of task things, into how it's actually being applied into task management. And I think the biggest thing is, if we had Scott back today, you know what he'd talk about? Which is the role of the marketer in realizing what tools actually to use. There's Perplexity for research. There's Claude for basic business organizational structure. And then there's ChatGPT for more of a voice. So any marketer who's kind of not looking at all of those 3, intermingling that with kind of what they do, I think needs to kind of go back and kind of look at their strategy. And the other takeaway too is that, there's this raging content. You can't get off LinkedIn without seeing it. And Scott be the first. And by the way, Scott's out there on LinkedIn every single day, which is, do you use AI to create content or no? Because we're being flooded with bad stuff all over the place.
Right.
I think if Scott was back, you know what he'd talk about? AI as the thinking marketer's tool and how to use it right. And maybe we'll get him back for that.
Oh my gosh, I think you just hit on the perfect segue, because who covered that topic brilliantly? It was Drew Neisser. When we had Drew on the show, he took that conversation somewhere that I wasn't expecting it to go. Instead of talking about it as technology, he started talking about people and how to use this technology. And, I think what he told us was pretty eye-opening.
At the same time, two things can be true. You can be, people are going to lose their jobs and people are going to keep their jobs. And the people who are going to keep their jobs are going to be the ones who know how to use these tools to the greatest effect.
Well, not just that. I mean, that clip we just played, that might be my most favorite quote of the year. You know why? Because it removed the fear and it also raised the expectations.
Yeah, and what you were saying a minute ago was absolutely what Drew was telling us, that AI can put out a pretty mediocre or average product because it's aggregated product, right? So then it actually takes a human mind, it takes curiosity, it takes some intellect to put the strategy on top of it and to make that output or that deliverable better.
If we had Drew back, I think we get him to kind of talk about one of the bread and butter tools that AI is being used for today in the marketer's world, and that is creating your basic PowerPoint presentation. Marketers spend a lot of time, you spend a lot of time creating value-added, pinpoint, detailed, strategic, creative, insightful PowerPoints. It used to take a village to do that. My point is, people will plug things into PowerPoint now. You use AI to do it, and it will generate this incredibly nice-looking deck. That's the mechanics. My point is, I think if we had Drew back, he would talk about how the mechanics are out of it. How does this free up the staff, the marketing executives, the marketing team across the organization to basically come up with better, more creative thinking that goes into creating one of the basic tools of the trade, the marketing PowerPoint.
Right, absolutely. And how to be more innovative, how to help the company drive new revenue. It kind of takes you out of the implementation stage and allows you to really become a much more strategic leader in your organization. And it happens at every level of the organization. And I do think I've always cautioned everyone who uses AI, myself included, to never take it at face value. It's really all about make the product better.
Exactly. And I think Drew would circle back to that. And the point being, which is AI shifted from, task creation to task management. And now where it's going for marketers, and I think Drew would focus on this, and he did, which is this is freeing you up to how do you use this as a strategic tool to free up what you're going to do with your marketing game plan, the campaigns, the pitches, all of that. Because you know what? AI not just gets you faster with the mechanics. That's fine. That's bread and butter these days. I think what marketers need to focus on, I think Drew focused on this too, is that now start to use the thinking tools that AI brings to marketing. How do you reach out to customers for feedback and new and innovative ways that AI makes the job easier, but delivers you more data and more strategy to kind of go back and, to your point, make the product better.
Make the product better. And of course, I think his big parting thought to all of us was that human judgment is irreplaceable. And I do think that's exactly correct, So, and that was his advice to all of us. Like the quote he just said, you need to master the tools and the technology. And that's what job security looks like in the future, at least, for sure in the marketing department.
I think it's frankly more than job security, don't you? I think it's career advancement. And I think that, our target audience here, as you founded the vision of this podcast, Liz, is that, you want to talk, we're talking to leaders and trendsetters and not pacemakers. We're talking to pacemakers. Let's talk to pacemakers too, there's there. Or pace setters.
Pace setters, right.
We like those guys too. My point though is, I think that the current generation of marketing executives coming up probably has a better tool set to use than you and I certainly
Oh,
did
for sure.
during the course of our long careers. And I think the more they can master those, which they're probably doing, but not just the mastery of the tool set, the mastery of how do you create the new strategic thinking and ROI product management for your organization is going to get you ahead, because you're the person that's using AI tools more effectively in your job, and thus your career.
Yep. All right. So I'm just going to recap for a minute, right? So what Scott taught us was that AI changes buying, right? And then what Drew taught us was that AI changes marketing, right? And then together, what you had just said is it really changes a career trajectory. So I think that leads us really nicely into the next conversation that we want to talk about, and that was, it all came from Justin Racine. He completely changed how I feel about the customer experience, right? He's just brilliant at it. So he said something that sounds obvious, until you realize that most companies don't actually do it.
Price maybe isn't king. It's experience. And I'm a millennial. I'm on the later millennial side, but I fall within that group. And it's true. I mean, if you look at the millennial generation and even Gen Zs and younger generations, it's the instant gratification. You can go on Instagram or TikTok or whatever, and you could sit there all day and swipe through and look at videos and then digest content in an instant. And we have grown up in a culture where we all grew up with computers and we grew up with, the World Wide Web and the internet and all of these things. So we inherently kind of learned all of this ourselves, and we can learn how to order through a buying portal ourselves if it's intuitive and made easy.
So how do you feel about what Justin just told us?
I think, a little background on Justin Racine, which is, by the way, he's now back in being a CMO for a distribution company. So he's kind of back to his roots.
In medical supply and services, right? Okay.
But the thing about Justin is, Justin was early on and a big proponent of understanding all of the B2B engagement happening out there across channels that made him very proficient in reading the tea leaves for how all this kind of plays out for marketing. That's why I think his point rings true. Because if you look at just what's happening just in the past 2 years, 18 months, 36 months, it's pretty rapid shift. There's a channel shift to digitally driven omni-channel marketing. And I think he spoke to that in droves with the point he just made.
Yeah, and he was the one that pointed out to us that, B2B buyers are not that different from consumers. And really, particularly as, the younger generations take charge of marketing and leadership, they're looking for Amazon-level service. So it was one thing when Amazon told us that, gee, this lotion goes really good with that body wash. But now imagine how that's being applied in B2B, where as a buyer, you can see that if I'm looking for a product safety kit, let's say it's fire safety, now AI is going to help me understand everything that needs to be in that kit. I mean, that's huge. And it goes as far as like building products and industrial supplies, right? You don't just want a roof on that building. You want the reservoir to actually have the same lining or the same kinds of lining or the same quality lining. That's the sort of thing that AI will connect the dots on for B2B buyers. And that's what Justin told us would happen.
This is how the timeline is changing. It always helps to understand a little bit of history to kind of see where the trend is going. And this all took shape during the pandemic. Frankly, people my age got out.
Which is old.
Yeah. Well, not that old, but, we look good. We look good. People my age retired. And so a younger, more digitally driven B2B buyer, including a B2B marketer,
True.
They began to come into their own. Now they're the dominant decision maker in these channels because, as I just mentioned, they're digitally driven, they're channel driven, and what they're using AI for is they want a lot more self-service tools on the marketing side because you know what? It hasn't happened yet because B2B doesn't shift overnight. But you know what? It's an agent world. And to your point, Amazon,
yeah.
If you kind of look at what Amazon Business does, And I follow those guys pretty close. They're putting out agents for all this, including for marketing. And so Amazon, once again, to kind of Justin's point, is you watch the bellwethers to how this is going to change B2B marketing in the agent world based upon digitally driven buyer behavior. That's where it's coming from. And I think that's what Justin, or her two, brought back to us in his segment. Great guest.
And the other thing he pointed out to us, and you hit on it a minute ago, and it's really about a collective buying group. You know, of course, there were always decision makers and influencers in the buying cycle for B2B, but now it's a much larger collaborative group that makes these decisions. And I think Justin saw that coming. And Justin even thought that maybe the portals that we were building for our customers should be collaborative portals, you know, where everybody can kind of weigh in on what they're seeing in terms of, you know, the products and services that need to be purchased.
And, you know, the thing is, one of the points that Justin, I think, would, if we had him back today, is he would talk about probably the ever-shifting faster increase in the B2B buying behavior as it applies to, you know, digital marketing for B2B. But you know what? The tools are getting faster and better, and that's where you really got to keep up.
Right, like a collaboration hub.
You and I have seen demonstrations, Liz, where you can create a brand new campaign based upon shifts in buyer behavior that kind of came in minutes ago. And I have seen these demonstrations at a lot of trade shows I've been to over the months. It's incredible. So the pace at which you can change a campaign, change a landing page, put in better marketing copy, pinpoint who your segmentation and personalized buyers are, that's changing with literally the speed of light. And it's the B2B marketers tied back to the buyer behavior Justin talks about, which is a big driver of how effective you're going to be as a marketer going forward.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that Justin pointed out to both of us and to our audience was that all of these tools need to be structured to help the individual buyer do their jobs better.
Exactly.
Now, when I was, you know, working very deeply in B2B marketing, thought leadership was doing that. We were never asking our marketing tools to do that. That's a huge shift. And like you said, one for the better, right?
See, you just summed up something extremely important for B2B marketers, Liz, which is do your job better. You know, when I was with Digital Commerce 360 and kind of invented that whole channel over there, I would do a lot of surveys on this topic. Forrester does it, Gartner does it, McKinsey does it, on down the line. And if you look at, you know, one of the biggest tools applied to the change in B2B marketers today is that price is not the biggest driver of B2B buyer behavior from a marketing perspective.
Exactly.
It's, do you have the tools, the selection, the options I want to make this happen right now?
And a refined customer experience.
Yeah. But my point, though, is it all goes back to your Amazon, your Amazon point. We all bring, and marketers need to understand this better than anybody, and I think you certainly do. Everything we do online is rooted in our personal experience. You know, so the whole Amazon experience has been, I mean, it's not new. You've heard about it. In marketing land, you've heard about it. But, you know, buying a jet engine is different than buying, you know, replacement roofing shingle. But you know what? Those expectations are grounded in, I want this because I want this. So the thing for marketers is to understand that buyer behavior, to use the tools to meet those buyer needs, especially in an agent-driven world, which is becoming more and more part of the B2B marketing world, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I'm going to shift gears a little bit because I want to talk about another conversation and all the things that we learned from it. And it really has to do with how the marketing team communicates internally. And this conversation came from Cindy Greenglass.
She was good.
She is so good.
One of the best ones we've had.
Well, there you go, everybody. You heard it here first.
If we had a Hall of Fame, I think she'd be one or two, don't you think?
Yeah, because, you know, her point, yeah, absolutely. And her point was that marketers need to do a better job of convincing the executive team of what needs to be done and what they believe is going to drive revenue. So listen to this for a second.
For professionals that are in the communications business, we are very poor at internal communication. We often speak to ourselves and each other, but we aren't prepared to speak the language of business or speak the language of the other people. And as a result, we fail to be heard in a way that is meaningful for us to be seen and get a seat at the table.
Ouch, right? It hurts a little bit, but it's true. How many great marketing ideas die on the vine before they can even get to the customer because marketing doesn't know how to build the business case and sell into their own organization. So that's really what she's trying to tell us and help us do.
But one of the things that I think Cindy, the plain unvarnished truth, I think, to that episode, Liz, and you tell me because you still do this, but you do this as a CEO for a lot of years, which is in a lot of organizations, it's organizational roadblocks that prevent marketers from doing a better job. They may think they have a seat at the table, but maybe they don't, because they may have a seat at the table because they're assisting sales, because they're responsible for product management, all the traditional, the CMO roles, if you will. But if that's not cross-organizational, if you don't have a true voice in decision-making, then your job and your career is going to be limited. And I think Cindy kind of pointed that out. But don't you think that?
Well, I do. And I think she gave us great advice as to how to change that.
Exactly.
Change that dynamic. So the first thing she talked about was make sure that you can talk in the CFO's language. You really have to quantify how the ideas you're bringing to the executive team will generate growth for the business. I thought that was huge, right? And then the other thing is, don't overwhelm the executive committee with dashboards and, whiz-bangy tools. They just want to know how you're building the business case so that they can immediately see how this is going to help them drive revenue. Right?
I'm having fun today. Money talks.
Good.
Money talks. Bullshit walks. I'll give you just a little example here that kind of sums up what Cindy was talking about. I knew a CMO of a very large distribution company, and the guy was newly on board, and he was hired by the CEO, and he was charged with changing everything digital with marketing as applied to kind of what these guys did. And these guys are old school. And so he came in and it was crickets. He was by himself. So the thing is, he was not getting organizational buy-in for any of the things Cindy was talking about. You know what he did? He went straight to what you're talking about, which is the CFO, make him happy. So he did product promotion, product placement, product campaigns surrounding on getting their first ever sales going on Amazon. And in 6 months, the sales from those marketing campaigns, that marketing specialization was driving revenue equal to their top selling branch. So go back to the quarterly meeting and they, hey, how's it going? Well, let me show you this. You know what? That changed their organizational buy-in from the marketer's perspective. And the guy began getting the ear he needed in the C-suite all across the board because, to your point, and to Cindy's point, he made it ROI and grounded marketing into revenue growth.
Nothing freezes up a marketing budget like ROI, like revenue momentum, right?
And Cindy gave us a game plan for how marketers can do that blow by blow, don't you think?
Well, I do. And do you remember what some of her best advice was? Some of her best advice was to concentrate on customer retention rather than customer acquisition. In most of the marketing departments I worked with over the years, we were always trying to acquire new customers. And Cindy's like, you're going to make a lot more money if you can keep and grow the customers you already have. I thought that was a game changer.
If Cindy was here now, why do you think how would she double down on that? And I guess I'll ask you that question because it seems like a no-brainer to me. Customer retention? I mean,
I know, but we never spent marketing dollars on it, ever. And it was because we didn't have the data. Another one of Cindy's big points was to go out and get the data, because that's how you're going to build the business case. So you're going to have to go talk to customer service. You're going to have to go talk to sales. You're going to have to talk to people on the front lines with the customers. And that's how you determine, what are they buying? What will they buy next? How will we use our tools to do that? So she's a big proponent of, let's really spend some marketing dollars on retention. And that's a new thought.
Yeah, but it's funny you just mentioned that, because, one of our other guests, Barry Litwin, who kind of took us to CEO school on our podcast
sure
here.
Did.
I don't know if we're going to talk about Barry. We might get to Barry just yet. But my point is, Barry, just became CEO of Test Equity, and he spent his first umpteen months building his leadership team, including, his CMO. They're all just back from the road, literally just back from the road, doing everything you just mentioned, which is out with the entire team, talking to customers one-on-one. What do you need? How do we do better? And you know what? Classic Barry Litwin playbook.
Oh my gosh, Mark, another perfect segue, because the next person and the next conversation I wanted to talk about was Richard Guha. We talked to Richard Guha about how to innovate. How should companies be innovative? Because he thinks nobody's being innovative, and you can trump your competition quickly if you can start doing that. But his whole point was internal listening first. I think if we listen to this clip, you're going to hear him say that it's not about brainstorming, it's about diagnostics.
I think one of your key points, if I'm hearing correctly here, is that innovation isn't a brainstorming exercise. It's a diagnostic process.
Diagnostic and then procedural. You've got to have a culture which welcomes it. You've got to have a culture which rewards people. I spent some time at Mars Incorporated, which, believe it or not, despite the fact we think of as candy, also has a substantial B2B business. But I remember I was working on a project, and they decided not to continue it. But you know what? I got a bonus for being on a, quote, fails project, because we had done a good job of identifying and actually in the long run saved the company money by saying, no, it doesn't justify the return. That was rewarded in that company.
I love that term, diagnostics, because you know what? There are statistics, and there's reading statistics the right way, anything from your analytics all the way up to your campaign metrics, whatever it is. And I think that's to his point, which is you find the devil in the details, in the numbers, to give you the insight you're going to need to begin to change things, to broaden the impact of what your marketing is doing. I always thought that was one of his key points.
Yep. Yep.
Find out where the pain points are. Find out the metric that nobody else in marketing is seeing, but you are. And that is going to be the lever to start to kind of move the needle on things. Innovation, like he said.
Absolutely. And the other point he made in terms of innovation that goes right along with that thought was to look at internal pain points. What byproducts are we getting from this manufacturing that's just sitting on a pallet behind the plant? He really wanted us to look at adjacencies and to see what was available right under our own noses that could be repurposed and sold in the marketplace. And that conversation blew me away.
Referring back to that conversation, he kind of talked about listening problems. Can you elaborate on that? That seems so fundamental, but why do you think there's a listening problem that he was so...
I don't think it's a listening problem. Okay. I'm going to give everybody a little bit of grace here.
Okay.
And Cindy pointed this out too. What we have is the inability to make time to go have conversations that are cross-discipline, right? We need to have more conversations, particularly marketing. Marketing needs to be able to get out of their chairs and go talk to the other divisions, go talk to the other departments, because that's when you'll hear their pain points. That's when some of the innovation will start to kind of give you an aha moment. So I'm not sure it's a listening problem. I think it's capacity.
Remember Cool Hand Luke?
Of course.
The best counterculture Paul Newman movie of the 1960s, 1968. What we have here is a failure to communicate.
Right.
So, don't you think?
Right. There you go. It's our inability, because of the time crunch of our days, to be able to go out and have these meaningful conversations that really could, take the organization in a new revenue stream.
By the way, to our loyal listeners across the world, across the ponds, across Infinitum out there, I was going to work on one of my damn movie cliches, didn't you?
Oh, of course, yes. And next we'll get a game show reference.
You set me up perfectly, my friend. Just perfectly.
Yeah, that's good for me, right? Okay, so let's see, Mark. Let's take a second and recap again, right? So we've mentioned Scott and Justin and Cindy and Richard and all kinds of folks, right? I think we said this at the top of the episode. So what we're hearing across the board is that listening is key, and they're all asking us to do that in order to innovate in new ways. So that's kind of a common thread that we get. So I think we just need to make that point and kind of hammer it home.
Yeah, well, I think the thing too, Liz, I'm going to refer back to you. You had the vision for this podcast, and thanks to you, we're bringing all this to light with your vision. I think where we're listening very closely to the comments we're getting from our listeners, very close to the comments we're getting from our guests to date, and we're going to continue to work very hard to bring you even bigger, better, focused episodes that really help these marketers do their job better.
Absolutely. That is the goal, no doubt about it. So, if we think about all the conversations we've just talked about, right? Scott told us AI changes how customers buy, right? Drew told us that AI changes how marketers work. Justin showed us that experience beats price. Cindy, proved that communication creates influence and change. So these are all pretty exciting things that help us differentiate and help us do our jobs better. Marketing has never really been about marketing as something that's just kind of struck me since we started having this conversation. It's always been about understanding people, because technology is always going to be changing. Buyers are always going to change. Channels are changing just as fast as all of those other things. But understanding the customer, that's the constant priority.
I agree. I think if I'm going to sum up our first year or so in the podcast world, Liz, we're trying to bring the connective tissue together. These episodes are not just willy-nilly who we could get. I think we've done, to our credit, and frankly to your credit, a pretty good job of trying to help identify what's really important to B2B marketers they need to know about and keep on top of. And believe you me, that's our mission to kind of keep doing better at that.
Absolutely. Okay, so as you all know, because you've seen this before, we try to do a lightning round at the end of some of our episodes. So Mark and I are going to attempt one amongst ourselves, just to kind of recap everything we've been talking about, today. So here we go. Mark, do you want to start?
One prediction that's already come true.
Okay. I believe Scott Wingo nailed it on this one. He said AI wasn't going to be another marketing tool. Yeah, he got that right. It was going to become another customer. That's what blew my mind. But it did come true, right? So at the time, that sounded futuristic. But like I said a few minutes ago, that was like only 10 months ago. So there you go, Scott. And while everybody is using, ChatGPT and Gemini and Perplexity and Claude, companies are having to optimize AI discovery, right? So that was another thing they talked about. It's not just about Google anymore, right? We really have to optimize what's going on with AI. So we've watched some of those predictions come true practically overnight.
I didn't get a chance to say, Liz, come on down.
I told you he was going to do a game show reference.
Damn
okay,
right.
So let me do one then. All right, Mark, you ready?
Yeah.
All right. One piece of advice that every CMO should act on this quarter.
I think we had this from a couple of speakers, including Scott. Stop treating AI like a productivity hack and start treating it like a business strategy. Drew Neisser said something that really stuck with me. Don't ask AI to think for you. Use it to think with you. I got to tell you, those are words to live by.
Say that again, because I think that's worth repeating.
Yeah. which is don't ask AI to think for you, use it to think with you.
Don't ask AI to think for you, use it to think with you. Those are very noble, straightforward, a great way to kind of, think about this at all times.
By the way, there's tools out there that we could use that to have kind of JFK say that for us.
That's true. That's true, but that stuff freaks me out.
I think so.
Okay, you got another one for me?
Yeah. Which guest do you think will look back on 5 years from now and say, boy, they saw it first?
Oh, I got to go back to Scott, man. He just rocked my world. So, he was talking about it's not about prompts, or saving a few minutes, doing some of your implementation. He's talking about AI agents fundamentally changing how buying is happening in the world. And I think that's exactly right. 5 years from now, I'm going to go, yeah. And it's only gotten probably better or more intense. I don't know which. Maybe both. So here, now my turn, okay? All right. What advice surprised you the most?
Well, do you want my answer in the form of a question?
No.
Okay. Well, I'd work that in too, I think Richard Guha, perspective on innovation. I expect him to talk about technologies or disruptive ideas. Instead, he said innovation is really a diagnostic process. And I think there is no plainer, direct statement than that from a guest to kind of sum up where all this stands. But now here's one for you.
Okay, here we go.
What's one thing we've personally changed because of these conversations?
It kind of harkened back to listening, right? But I think one of the things I've seen you and I do, even in our own work, is we ask why before we ask how. When I first started out in B2B marketing, it was really all about how are we going to get this done? But now we ask why we're doing it. And I think that some of the things that Richard Guha had told us, and certainly a lot of what Justin had told us, was about making sure that you're asking why. Why will a customer need this? Why will this drive revenue for your business? And then move to the how.
But, one of the things I've liked about all of our episodes, Liz, is, and I think we got better at this as we kind of got into the year that was, which is we always ask our guests to kind of talk about their background, their history, their career, their perspective. And I think that help identify lessons to be learned that other marketers can take and apply to their position. That's part one. Part two, I think that that we always try and ask our guests to leave some piece of good advice, no matter what the topic is, for how B2B marketers can understand how they can do something better that will advance their performance, their company objective, and all of that. I think we've been pretty good at that. But you know what? Going forward, I think we're going to bring more how-to advice and practical. What do you think folks should do about this to our game plan here? What do you think?
Yep. I think you're absolutely right. And I think that what we want our audience to remember is that the marketers who thrive are the ones who demonstrate their intellectual curiosity. They're the ones who ask the why questions before the how questions. And they're also the ones that will take the time and talk to everyone in a different division at the company, talk to everyone in a different department, and try to gather as much information and data as you need to help innovate.
We're talking Al Pacino here. We're just getting started. That hurt.
Wow, that sounded like it hurt. I think it hurt our listeners too. So that's probably a really great place to stop, right? We can't thank you enough for being part of this episode. We hope you've gotten as much out of the past year from these conversations that Mark and I have. And certainly we hope to see you back here very soon for more of those brilliant marketers telling us what's going on with No Bull.
And you're seeing what these folks are really like. Mark and his sister. At it again.
At it again. Bye, everybody.